So welcome title nerds, welcome WFG agents and friends. Thank you so much for joining us here today. I have a title slide. I don't know why I created it. I'm probably not even going to use it, but I just want to thank Justin Tucker, Executive Vice President, Director of Strategic Initiatives, employee number 4 for WFG, coming to us live from Portland, Oregon. Thank you so much for joining us today, my friend.
And employee number 4, I think 11 years back to where I didn't have gray in my beard and I actually had a full head of hair. And here we are 11 years later. So
this is a stressful business, man. I think it's pretty awesome that you still have a goatee.
Yeah. Well,
I think it's living the dream, by the way.
Yeah, have the signature, the trademark. So
that's right. I like it. Those of you that don't know Justin, this is a huge honor for me to have him along here. I truly believe that he could be a thought leader and run marketing for any company in the world and do it absolutely successfully. And those of you that know him know that that is truth when I say that. I'm Sam Trimble. I'm your MTD for one of your MTDs for agency alongside Sarah Hash and Brian Nacklis. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today, we're going to be talking about the strategy of strategy, how to build and iterate your way to success. And again, I had a title slide, but it's totally pointless, so I'm just not even going to use it. I will have our contact information at the end, though, and hopefully you don't mind that I'm going to share your direct email. I know you're kind of an open book, and so I was going to share that with people as well.
Yeah, please do.
Awesome. So we were just leading into this conversation talking about it is that time of the year when you are starting to think about what is next for your business, what is next for you personally. People are making thoughts of resolutions, not only professionally, but personally as well. And I think where I wanted to start the conversation is strategy as a whole. In your mind, what is strategy? It sounds simple, but it's really not.
Well, I think strategy is the most important step that often gets overlooked. I mean, we get to this time of year and we say, okay, it's time for goals and budgets. And we're, setting our goals of what we want to grow market share to and what we, hope our revenue is going to be, whether you're a company thinking about it overall or you're an individual sales associate thinking about it for yourself. We really start to think about the goals and then the outcome, the budget. What are we going to spend? What are we going to make? But the bridge in between that is strategy. And strategy is the time I think people spend the least amount of time in. And it's probably the most important part. I mean, I often use the analogy, if I decided that I wanted to lose weight, which I should make that decision, and I just said, okay, I'm gonna lose weight, and then I go step on a scale and it tells me what my outcome is. In between that, if I want to impact what I see on the scale, I need to be doing things like, okay, what's my workout strategy look like? Am I going to do intermittent fasting? Am I going to take my dog out on more walks every day? There's the executables in between that bridge what your goal is and what the outcome is. And it's the most important part of the puzzle. I mean, Sam, I often say, like, your effort sets your floor, but your strategy sets your ceiling. And if you're not started, start, because effort matters. But after you've started, what you're working on is more important than just putting in more effort.
So something that you say that always kind of stands out to me that I think is super pertinent right here is, like, in today's world, we're used to hearing about, like, what is your why? What is your why? Strategy is kind of like, what is your how, right? And they're both important and they're different, but what is your how really needs to become a part of your thought process when you're looking towards growing into the future.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to offend Simon Sinek. I love the start with why phenomenon. I think why is vision, and vision is important. What are you setting out to do, and how do you put that vision out in front so people can be united and go seek that? But then you have the strategy part, and that's your how. And I got to be honest, I'm much more interested in how these days. I mean, why is still important, but how? What is it that you're actually doing that's going to allow you to accomplish that vision? And it can be as simple as people saying, oh, we're going to give the best service. Okay, like, I think a lot of title companies strive to give a really high level of service. But then it's like, well, how are you going to give the best service? What leads to that? You can say that, you can put it on a marketing piece. It can be a goal or part of your vision. But then there's this strategy component of, like, okay, what is it going to look like when people walk into our offices? Or are we going to have a feedback loop on the back end that lets consumers tell us how we did? Or, there's all these different parts of that strategy that lead to the ability to say, we're giving the best customer service. So I really, again, why is vision, but how is strategy?
Yeah, something that I jotted down in our preparation was the idea of being effective versus being efficient when it relates to this.
Yeah, it's one of my favorite things. I had a consultant tell me this a while back, and it's never left my brain, which is that most people, when you say, would you rather be effective or efficient, they say efficient. Like, I want to get more efficient. And we structure ourselves that way. It's, how do we how do we make more calls, or how do we get more efficient in our process? And all of that is great. But I would argue that the thing we need to look for is what's effective, because you can get very efficient at doing the wrong things, and you can do them over and over and over. My golf swing is a perfect example of something I've become very efficient at, but is not very effective. I would argue that the way to do it is to figure out what's effective, what things are working or getting you that outcome, and then become more efficient at the things that are effective. So it's just an order for me. It's like, what's effective first, and then how do we get more efficient at that?
So now that we've kind of dissected a little bit of what strategy actually is and what it means, which if you listen to JT right now, it's different than what I would think, but it makes perfect sense the way you put it. So if we figured out a little bit about what strategy actually means, let's move into, the process of actually implementing that strategy and actually kind of iterating on that.
Yeah, I think the key word you use there, Sam, is iterate or iterative. I mean, strategy is a very iterative process. It necessitates taking risks or trying things and then getting feedback from that, and then saying, well, do I double down and do more, or was this the wrong strategy? We used to use this thing called a strategy or a risk wheel. And a strategy or risk wheel was about, first of all, like the why. And the why to me is like, how compelling is this thought? So we have this thought of, we're going to start serving specialized custom donuts with buyers' names on them at every signing. Like, first of all, how compelling is that? Why are we making this decision or this strategy? And then it moves into this, like, well, how confident are we in that? Like, are we confident that that's going to actually make an impact? And if there's belief, I'll tell you right now, 9 times out of 10, when people believe in something, even if it's the wrong strategy, but if they believe in it, they're going to find a way to make it successful. So that confidence or belief plays a really big role. Then the next phase of that risk wheel is participation. It's to start. It's to actually do it, to not let it stay on a yellow legal pad or in your notes app, but it's actually to go out and participate and implement that strategy. And then what you're going to get after that is feedback. You're going to get feedback from your clients. You're going to get feedback from employees. You're going to get feedback from buyers or sellers who walk in your front door. And that feedback is going to let you know the result. And if the result is what you want it to be, keep doing it. If the result isn't what you want it to be, that's where you finish the wheel and you go back to your why and you think of a new idea and you iterate. And so you kind of keep going through this wheel. And one of the best stories, I'm a storyteller, so I apologize for this, but one of the best stories I've ever heard about this, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with the book Chicken Soup for the Soul. It's an old book that now has, I don't know, they have chicken soup for your elbow, and, chicken soup for your dog. And I mean, it's become this really popular series. And when the team who wrote that book or the marketing team after that book was completed was trying to figure out how to launch it, they would sit in a room and they would say, okay, we're not going home today. We're not leaving today until we take 3 different risks or 3 different iterative ideas about how we're going to get this book live and or get this book to be popular. And, first day, that's probably pretty easy. And second day is still probably pretty easy. And they're doing this. And all of a sudden, they're 15 or 20 days in this process, and they're running out of ideas. They're like, I don't know what else to try. And so they're sitting there, and they needed to come up with one more idea before they could go home at night. And this person goes, why don't we send a box of these books to the jurors of the OJ trial? And everyone was like, we have no idea why we would do that, but it's our last risk for the day and we can all go home. So sure, let's send a box to the jurors. Well, if you remember that case, it was cameras everywhere. People were looking for any hidden meaning that they could find about what was going on in behind closed doors. And they saw all these jurors who had nothing else to do walk out. Cameras caught them all carrying this book, Chicken Soup for the Soul. And it was like, wait, does this book have a special meaning? And why are they all reading it? And what's going on here? And that little risk, that little iterative idea ended up launching that whole genre of books. And so I call it a risk, and it's maybe the wrong terminology for it. It's just to have the wherewithal to try something new and then to see what the outcome is based upon that.
I love the idea of, and I have kind of a story, and you've heard me tell this story, and you told it one time on stage after we talked about it, but I love the idea of like, so iteration, that can be, you're a big words guy, you're highly educated. Like for a simpleton like me, I'm like, iteration, I got to Google that and make sure I know what we're talking about. But that said, so iteration, the idea of being able to take what's working and try things related to that. The things that aren't working, we get so caught in it, we get in a rut, and they may not be working anymore, but we keep doing them. But the freedom you have when you let go of the stuff that's not working anymore. And I love, and again, you can roll your eyes if you want. I love the Trader Joe's story. So,
Yeah.
the question is, does anybody know what Trader Joe's or top two selling products when they started were? And you think of Trader Joe's now, and this would blow your mind: cigarettes and ammo.
Yeah, ammo and tobacco. Yeah.
Tobacco and ammunition. And all they did was they had an iterative process. They took the things that were high performing and doubled down on that and expanded from those products and services. They took the things that weren't working anymore. Every 30 days, they would go through this, find the SKUs that were no longer performing, and they would eliminate the bottom 10 products from their shelves. And they became what they are today.
And so now I can make gluten-free spinach artichoke dip. So
who would have thought that when it was tobacco and ammunition? But I love the idea. It's just that simple. The things that you're getting as a title agent, as a real estate attorney, the things that you're getting good feedback on, the experiences your clients and customers are having that they like, the parts of the process that you're getting good feedback on. Expand upon those, grow upon those, explore those a little bit. Sometimes it means just sitting around a table and rapping with your team and figuring out, what comes out of those conversations. Hence the juror idea for chicken noodle soup for the soul, but also what's not working. Sometimes we don't want to admit that. Like, I can remember as a title agent sitting there sometimes, and there were things that were so ingrained in our process, but we would sit back and be like, I don't know that this is working like it used to work anymore. And having the courage and the confidence to let go of some of the things that maybe aren't performing the way they used to.
Hey man, I'm not connected to an idea. I'll put it out to pasture if it's the wrong idea, even if it was successful before. And you made me think of two things as you were talking there. And one of them is not very sophisticated, but it's something that I used to do as a sales rep, which was just, I kept a list of keep, stop, and start. And keep were the things that I was going to continue to do because they always worked. And stop were the things that I was going to free myself up from doing because they were taking time and energy, but they never worked. And then start were, what are the things I'm going to try? What are the new things I'm going to implement in my strategy? I'll add one other thing there, and I'm a big book guy. So if you haven't read The Creative Curve or seen Alan Gannett speak, I would highly, highly recommend it. But he talks about the best ideas, as we're talking about strategy, the best ideas are both novel and familiar. So if something is too novel, it's scary. It's new. I don't want to try that. I don't understand it. And if something is too familiar, it's boring. I've seen it before. I'm not interested. But if you can find this balance of something that's rooted in being familiar, but has a little novel spin on it, that's where some of the best ideas come. And then eventually ideas will follow this creative curve where things that were interesting actually start to become boring. And that's why people need to keep iterating. If we just continue to do the same thing over and over and over, even if we have this law of diminishing returns around it, there's got to be a moment where you look at it and say, do we need to keep doing this? Do we need to tweak it? Or is there something that we could be spending time, energy, and money on that would get us the outcome we're looking for?
Yeah. And it's funny because, having been in the title agent shoes in my past life, I remember it being something that we were fearful of doing sometimes, because we thought, oh no, this is going to have a big impact. People aren't going to like it if we take away this thing that doesn't seem to be working as well. But there's some people that are really into it. And it could be as silly as, I had some of the nicest pens in Texas, man. Like, our pens were the best pens. And I'm not even kidding, right? Like, they were metal, they were heavy, they wrote great, they were kind of gel, they were blue ink, which is important in Texas, the opposite in some other parts of the country. I hear you guys on the East Coast. But pens. And so I came in and I was like, oh my gosh, how much money are we spending on these pens quarterly? It was like, I don't know. We figured out, and it was like, man, we got to find, that's a salary that we're spending on pens. And there was fear over something as silly as pens, that if we got rid of those pens, there were people that were going to be upset. We did it. We shifted to something that was like a third of the price. A lot less of them were being handed out on a regular basis like candy. And there was one person that ever said anything. And after the first time that person said something, when they wrote with the new pen, they were like, hey, these are great too. And frankly, I'm with you guys because I love you guys. It has nothing to do with pens. And I just kind of realized it. So there was legitimate fear in the management team that taking away something that had always worked, we had always been known for, was going to negatively affect business. And it had nothing to do with how we were getting business. We just thought it did.
Yeah, our CEO, Steve Azonian, has a really simple couple of questions that he asks when you think of that, which is like, who are you? Who do you want to be? And how are you going to get there? And it's like, if who you are is the pen company, is that what you want to be? And if it's not what you want to be and you want to be something else, then what are the steps that you need to take to get there? So I think that's a really simple, he would also always say, a year from now, if a newspaper was going to write a headline about WFG, what would we want that headline to read? What would we want that to say? And I think that that's where you can have some introspection and look internally and say, okay, some of these things we've attached ourselves to, is that really who we want to be? Is that really what we want that headline to say, or have that headline read?
Yeah. So I think the first couple stops on our journey today about strategy and like the iterative process, if I'm hearing anything, I'm hearing there's no 100% right answer. The goal is to start somewhere and then take the things that are working, expand upon them, and don't get emotionally attached to the things that aren't working. And it's okay to let things go. Have the confidence and the courage to let go of the things that are no longer serving you as a company or an individual for that matter.
Absolutely. No matter where you're out on that spectrum, the goal is just to simply start, and then through starting, iterate, and then you get better at the strategy side of it. Again, it goes back to that saying that I love so much, which is your effort sets your floor, but your strategy sets your ceiling.
One more time, say kind of Steve's quote that you just said a minute ago. I think that was really powerful.
Yeah, it's who are we, who do we want to be, and then how do we get there?
Wow, that's like this conversation in a nutshell in a lot of ways, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's
The first is introspective. Who are we? The good, the bad, the ugly, the things we do well, the things we don't do well. Who is it that we want to be? Okay, there's this future state of this company, and then what are the things we need to do or focus on to bridge from who we are to who we want to be?
I love that. So I want to ask you a little bit. I think one of the coolest things as a title agent, I had 11 underwriters. Anyone who's met with me has heard me say that over and over again. There's a reason I had the connection with WFG, because they always said, hey, you want to look under the hood, ask us anything and we will tell you the answer. So I love the idea of being able to pick your brain a little bit. WFG is incredibly successful on the West Coast. We are an open book to any of your clients and our clients and customers. So what is going on in your strategy right now for WFG, kind of leading that charge? What is next? What is on the horizon? What are the things that you think are the most important topics to be kind of matriculating on heading into 2022?
Yeah, I love that you said that, Sam, because it's so true. I mean, sometimes we use our direct operations as testing grounds for various marketing or tech strategies. And then the goal is for us to be as open as possible and sharing that experience with our title agents, because ultimately when they grow, we grow. And that's, really important to us. And when I think about what our strategic boulders are, where our strategic focus is, the first one at the top of this is consumer experience. And I want to make that, that point really, really strongly there, which is the consumer, the buyer, the seller, the borrower. It's very leverageable. If you can create a good experience for that person, then our partners, our customers, our realtor and lender partners, it's sellable to attract new business. It's a reason for them to continue to use us. And the consumer is requiring more of a special experience than they ever have before. I think another thing we're focused on a lot, or want to get better at, is this idea of account-based marketing, or ABM. And that is more of how you personalize outreach. It's less mass blast emails and more one-to-one or one to a few, or at least more personalized when they receive it, about what they've interacted with, what they've clicked on, what they're interested in. So they're not just receiving every message, they're receiving the messages that are more connected to them. On a sales front, I'm going to use the word rehumanizing the sales effort and finding ways to more effectively use these different digital tools. There's a great book that just got launched by our friends over at BombBomb called Human-Centered Communication. We're taking all of our reps through a training with those guys and reading that book right now. And mainly it's because I think that there's this opportunity for us to start being more human in how we use some of these virtual tools, Zoom and text and different video platforms. And so I really believe that this will be the era of empathy and more of a human-centered communication and sales efforts. And then empowering our sales reps' voice. And that is figuring out how to provide them tools that not only are in alignment with our brand, but they give them their own voice and a little bit of customization. I know we have a lot of people on this call who are probably using Canva. One of the things we're exploring right now is an enterprise level Canva subscription, where we can preload it with company content, but then we can still give our users at the end of the day, our sales reps and our marketing folks, the opportunity to customize some of those materials and have their own voice. Another area I think is really important is optionality. And that goes back to the consumer experience, which you're going to have consumers who want to have a full RON or RIN or digital transaction, and some that still want to sit across the table from you, and some that are just like, send me out a mobile notary because I still want a human to be present. And we have to be able to meet all of the customers where they're at and give them all of those various, options, which I think is really, really important. We're going to double down on online reputation. We've already spent a lot of time in that area of how we gather reviews and service metrics like Net Promoter Score, and how we use that as a part of our sales pitch and our marketing. There are great tools out there right now like experience.com or Gather Up that take this to a whole nother level, from not just a company perspective, but to an individual perspective, where you're getting service metrics on an escrow officer or a sales rep. And then I think the last thing that I'll add here, and this isn't new to anyone, but part of our strategy is making sure that we know that this shifting market, that a big part of our focus is on how we're going to increase our resale market share. And the world has been great. We're so thankful for the market and all of the refinance business, and it's created great productivity numbers, and it's been, the icing on the cake. But in this shifting market where, I'm hearing numbers as much as a 60% reduction in refinance business through MBA's forecast, that ability to go out and add value to real estate agents, create those strategic partnerships, make sure that that we're finding new ways to engage and grow resale market share. I mean, man, that's going to be at the top of our list.
I love so much of what you just said. I mean, experiences. I just kept hearing that. And to me, I did a webinar with my boss, Justin Stutz, probably 2 or 3 months ago, and we talked about this. And if you were to dissect, so you guys looked at your Gather Up data, reviews that had come in. We compared 2019 pre-pandemic to 2020 into 2021 post-pandemic. And it was amazing, the keywords that we were able to pull out of those reviews. So pre-pandemic, it was very transactional, institutional. It was all about process. It was all about checking boxes and checklists and timelines. Pandemic hits. The keywords of reviews from consumers were all about experiences, how they were made to feel, people being empathetic, understanding, people being helpful and kind-hearted. And so you saw a shift. Everyone reevaluated everything. We were reevaluating business partnerships and relationships. We were reevaluating personal relationships, for that matter. And so the opportunity, as we continue to bounce back from this unprecedented time, lies in those experiences. How are you going to create an experience that is not only different, and so it stands out, but is better than your competitors? And so often it's these little things. So I don't want anyone on the call to get overwhelmed thinking, oh my gosh, we have to rethink our whole strategy. I think back to my time as a title agent, and I was like, wow, there's probably 4, 5, 6 years ago, something like that. The market was going crazy here in West Texas. People were slammed. Things were taking too long. Appraisers were behind. Sound familiar, right? Like, this is kind of where we are right now. And people were coming into the closing, and they didn't even have to wear masks and sit behind plexiglass then, but they were coming into closing in a worked up state. They were on edge. It wasn't a fun process. And so it was something as small for me and my marketing team to be like, you know what? We're going to make the entrance to our offices a great experience. There's going to be pots and plants and a park bench and a QR code with Wi-Fi, and we're going to have a menu that they can select from. Would you like some Fig Newtons and a cup of coffee, or would you like a glass of water and a bag of chips? And we provided that menu to them, and that's something that you've talked about in the past, and it created this experience. So when they got into the closing room, they were in a better headspace. They were cool, calm, collected, and it totally changed the process. What did that do for us as a company? Realtors, lenders, attorneys, they love their clients to be happy. Yeah. When their clients are happy and you improved upon their experience, they like you more. And when they like you more, guess who gets sent more deals? And so it was literally flowers, plants, Fig Newtons, coffee, Cokes, and free Wi-Fi. And it totally changed the experience by the way we presented it to them. So it doesn't have to be this huge thing. It can be something small that you can do right now.
Well, that's the key there. Is it doesn't have to be this massive overhaul or this huge development project or implementing this new piece of technology. Usually the things that create these experiences are very subtle and very small, and they just take a mindset and a focus on creating that experience. I mean, I always use as an example the difference between really do have no intention of trying to be pretentious in this story, but I think it helps illustrate the point. Back when I had a Toyota Tacoma and I would drive into Toyota, and it's like things were fine and people would come, greet me, and I would go sit in their lobby when they were servicing it or fixing my car. And that was great. And, then I later in life ended up driving an Audi, and I drive in there and it's the way that they would come greet me, and it's how they set up their seating area, and it's the types of things they had there available for me to read, and the types of snacks that they had, and how, if it was taking longer, instead of me wondering what was going on, they would just periodically come in and give me an update so that I wasn't sitting there going, I wonder what's going on. And none of that is a big spend, or none of that is this like new piece of technology that's going to revolutionize the experience. It was just the mindfulness to say, we're going to create these small processes that are going to create this experience. And I think that's really important to realize, is it doesn't have to be an overhaul. It can be these really little things that make a big impact.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love that you touched on reviews too. It's something that I just talk about constantly. I'm huge on it. I think it's if you're not strategic with how you're gathering up the reviews from the massive amount of transactions that are happening right now, they're going to be there forever. It's evergreen content. They're going to be online forever. If you don't have a strategy, reach out to your rep, connect with your MTD, and let's develop a strategy for you. I think that's more important than ever right now.
Well, and something else I'll throw out there with this around that is it's also simplifying the how we create strategy. As a company, we're shifting to an OKR format, which is objective and key results. And that OKR format is much simpler than what you would see in other like huge business plans where it's all these different tactics and strategies. I mean, OKR is really simple. It's what is your objective, and then what are the key results that would let you know that you accomplished that objective. It's really, really simple. And there's some great tools out there for that too. And there's a lot of literature out there. And then there's even platforms that you can implement that unite, take everything from being in silos and unite everything together. So you have a company OKR platform. Like one of the ones I'm looking at right now is called BetterWorks. So betterworks.com. And it's just a really simple platform to get all of the company's objectives in there together, whether it's a top-down corporate initiative or maybe something coming on more of a street level, and then to measure the progress of this. Because the last element of all that we're talking about from a strategy standpoint is you can put all of this beautiful work into the planning process, but if you don't have a system in place for revisiting it, for measuring the impact of it, and doing that on a semi-regular basis, whether that's a once a month meeting, a once a quarter meeting, but still that it doesn't just end up, the thing we've all heard before, it just ends up in a drawer and we don't do anything with it. And I mean that as if you're a company or if you're an individual sales rep or an escrow officer and you have your own goals and things you're trying to achieve, just make sure that there's a mechanism in place for revisiting it. On a personal level, outside of the company goals, I use a program called Monday.com, which is just a simple place where I put all of my objectives in there, all the strategies and tasks, strategic initiatives that I want to accomplish. And it's never not open on my screen. And I'm updating it, changing timelines, seeing where I get stuck, where do I need to add new people in. I mean, I look at that thing every single day.
So I think at the end of the day, it's all about doing something and then bobbing and weaving, which is your iterative process, as you put it. And not everything is going to work. Don't get stuck or glued to anything. Don't become emotionally attached. Have the courage to try new things. And I think the funny thing about it is it can sound overwhelming for somebody like me. But having kind of done that, it's amazing how organically it actually does happen. When you start with a goal in mind, we want to make our clients' experience better than all of our competitors. Okay. How are we going to do that? Go around the room. I like cookies and fresh chips. Okay. I like, free Wi-Fi. I like for my deed to be delivered to me in a really beautiful and impactful way. And yeah.
You know what I would add to that, as you're saying, because I agree with that. You put multiple people in a room and you have that conversation. I wouldn't even say, think about what you like from a title perspective. I would say, think about all the other experiences you've had in the world and what did you like? What made you feel good? What made you feel special? What made you say that, oh, I'm going to be a client for life to this place because they did X, Y, Z? Most of my favorite analysis comes from looking at companies outside of our industry and saying, how would that apply to title? How could we emulate even a piece of that strategy to create that same experience in our world? So I would think, as a consumer, as a person who's out there buying and selling and doing all kinds of things every day, just open that little antenna on your head and pay attention to the experiences that you get connected to and call to you. And then that's the best lesson. I mean, that's where you can emulate all kinds of amazing things that people way smarter than me have thought of, and I'll just copy it.
I think that's so interesting, because that's something I say. I was in a meeting, excuse me, earlier today, and I mentioned that the idea that I tried all these things. When I first got into the title business, I had a lot of naivete, and everybody was telling me, no, this is the title business. It's different. That won't work. And I'm like, but how could it work in every other industry? And it's not going to work here. Obviously, we're different. It's a different business. Clients and customers don't know a ton about what we do. But that said, implementing similar strategies to some of the most successful companies that I knew worked. Yep. So instead of taking it when somebody said, nah, it's a different business, that's not going to work, I said, well, why don't we just try it? And we tried it, and it worked. So I think at the end of the day, let's wrap up by saying, step out in faith, try something. If it doesn't work, bob and weave. If it does, double down, and know that we're here to support you along the way.
Yeah, I would just add a little caveat to that, which is we are absolutely willing to be collaboration partners through this process too. And so if anyone is sitting back and thinking, okay, it's that time for me to start analyzing, the strategy that links together our goals and budgets, and you want another set of eyes and ears and people to bounce things off of, or to ask, as much of what's worked for us as what hasn't, because there's a lot of stuff that hasn't. We are that open book, and we would love to help you guys out.
Absolutely. And that leads perfectly into this. You can scan this and connect with me on social and have my contact information. And here's the handsome devil we've been speaking with this afternoon. JT, this is your email, and I know how you are. This is how we collaborated at the beginning. I reached out and you responded. So I would say anybody here who thinks that, this is a process that they'd like to learn a little bit more about, has a question or a comment on anything we discuss, reach out to us. We are an open book. We are here to help. And I would be remiss if I didn't say what I say pretty much at the end of every presentation, every webinar, or every interview that I do. A rising tide absolutely raises all ships. If we can grow together, it will be even better than growing alone. So thank you so much for spending part of your afternoon with us, everybody. JT, I love you like a brother. I'm so thankful for you to be a part of my life, and the best is certainly yet to come. Thanks for hanging out for a few minutes.
Yep. Thanks for having me. Enjoyed the conversation.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thanks, you guys. Bye-bye.